Hello again, everybody. Some Dumb Guy here, and welcome to episode number 2 of SumDumWatch. This will be for the week of October 7th through October 13th, and we're going to cover all the things that I watched from my library. Movies, television, you name it, any theatrical viewings, if there happen to be any. We'll cover them all and we'll go through them, and let's get started, shall we? Okay. Number 1. Recently had the 40th anniversary screening, theatrical re-release of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and during that time the 4K release was pending shipment, and waiting for that, I decided it would be a good opportunity to revisit some of the sequels that I hadn't seen in a good many years. The first 2 films I've seen many times in fairly recent history. Everything part 3 through hadn't seen in a very long time, so I pulled out. This is the Nightmare on Elm Street collection, everything minus the remake that doesn't exist. This is the 7-film set, all in one box set in Blu-ray here, and I decided to watch parts 3, 4, and 5 for this week, and yeah. I was never a huge fan of any of the films after the second one. Although the third one had some aspects I like, I still have always been opposed to the more comedic, less scary Freddy. And I felt like that trend began in part 3. The whole cartoony thing didn't really work for me. Several of these films I hadn't seen probably since the 80s, maybe a little bit later, and yeah, I just went through and decided I'd give them a rewatch since they're there in my library, and I've come to appreciate part 3 a little bit more than I originally did. Still not the biggest fan of it. Still find it just a little bit too comedic for my taste. However, parts 4 and 5, I don't think they have any redeeming qualities whatsoever, and probably will never watch them again at this point. I just don't see it. I know they have some fans or whatever, but with each film becoming goofier, more comedic, Freddy's makeup becoming less gruesome and scary and more rubbery, just didn't work for me. So I like to give things more than one shot when I can, and sometimes waiting a while to see if my perception changes due to my taste, but in this instance, it didn't really happen, so we're moving on from that. Next on the list, we're going to have a little bit of theme this week. This is one of my recent pickups. I featured it on a recent unboxing video, and I try to go through one of these a week to maintain up to speed on my library here, but I at the time wasn't sure if I'd ever seen this one before. I thought maybe. Upon a recent watch, found out I don't think I did. Nothing was familiar to me at all. But it is Batman, The Mystery of the Batwoman, DC animated films. At the time I was speculating with the artwork I was seeing here that it might be somehow connected to Batman animated series, and it from the artwork, the voice actors, and what I saw in there, it appears to be kind of a follow-up to the I believe it's the new Batman Adventures, I believe it was, what was tagged on at the end of the animated series for its last season, featuring the, I believe to be the Tim Drake Robin, although in this movie you wouldn't be able to tell that. Doesn't present itself as Tim Drake, doesn't look like Tim Drake, doesn't behave like Tim Drake, and he's never really named in the movie. In fact, he didn't even need to be there. His presence was so completely wasted and useless. So that was probably my biggest disappointment from what little I know of the comic Batwoman character. There's really no connection here as far as the actual character of the Batwoman. So that was kind of a surprise. But overall, it's a fairly decent film. Moving on with kind of that same unintended trend here. I wanted to watch original 1989 Batman, my 4K here. Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, Kim Basinger. Love this movie. I think I needed some sound footage for a video I was putting together, and since I was doing that, it kind of put me in the mood to go ahead and rewatch the entire thing. It hasn't been too long since I've seen it. This film was re-released in the theater in 2022, and it was a 3-film Batman marathon in the theater, and I saw it then. That was probably the most recent time I watched it, but I don't think I'd actually seen my 4K copy since I bought it. Which brings me to the second film in that 3-film marathon, which was Batman Returns. This one, fortunately, I have a slipcover on. Slightly metallic slipcover. I saw both of these films when they were originally released in the theater, and then of course got to see them again in 2022 in the summer when they were re-released for their marathon. Batman Returns, I was never the biggest fan of. Even upon its initial release, I think it was probably like 13 years old, give or take. Never felt as connected to the first film as it should. There's a lot of elements to it that don't work as a sequel, and I always found that very disappointing. Of course, it's nowhere near as bad as the third and fourth film, which have no connections hardly whatsoever and can almost exist in their own universe. This one is at least tentatively connected, although there's just certain features about it that maybe I'll get into someday in a video that leave it, I don't know, leave me hanging in a way. But I decided to stick it out for that marathon that day. And taken on its own, I feel a little bit better about it now than I used to. Kind of like a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, where just judging it on its own merits without a comparison to the first film, which is difficult for me to do, I enjoy it a little bit more. So after I watched the first film, I decided to see if that held up and popped this in either that same day or the next day and watched it. And you know, it does have its fun moments. I can't deny that. It's just something that I will never quite be able to hold it up against this one and say, yeah, together these make a great pair. I just don't think they really do. The next one also comes from one of my recent unboxing videos. It is from 1986 Blu-ray Kino Lorber purchase. This is Michael Dudikoff's Avenging Force. And I'd only ever seen this once when it was pretty new. And it reunites these two guys here from the first 2 American Ninja films. And I remember when I watched this originally, it felt like it could be a spiritual sequel to those movies. And after I watched it, I was on the Internet Movie Database and looking up some details about it. Made by the exact same studio as those first 2 American Ninja films. And what I learned on there was that the script for this movie was actually a reworked sequel to, I believe it was Chuck Norris's Invasion USA. If I'm wrong about that, correct me. These are 2 titles I think I'm mixing up, might be mixing up in my head. But apparently Chuck Norris didn't want to do it. So even though they kept his character name, they reworked the story and made him a younger character and cast Michael Dudikoff in his role. Which I kind of found a little bit ironic, all things considered, because reworking that and separating it from the Chuck Norris film sequel, why not just rework it equally and make it a sequel to American Ninja? It would have worked just as well. You could have factored in a little bit more martial arts from Dudikoff into the movie. You've already got the same 2 lead actors in the cast, and they already have a history when this movie starts. I don't think it would have taken a whole lot to weave that in, since they were already tweaking with the plot anyway to separate it from what it actually was a sequel to. So I think that was kind of a lost opportunity, and I think it would have added to this film, which is, you know, nothing spectacular to write home about, but it's still a fun movie. I just think they could have done a little bit better with it, with a little bit more care. As for the rest, these are basically going to be continuations from my last weekly video. First and foremost, I have begun Season 5 of the Incredible Hulk Blu-ray. I have the complete box set on this one. I've been working through 2 to 4 episodes, give or take a week. And Season 5 is the last, and it's a short season, so probably be done with it by the time the next week is done. We'll see, depending on how much time I have. But I love this show. I used to watch it when I was a wee lad, and probably hadn't seen any of it since. Bill Bixby, got a real great appreciation for that man as he portrays this role. You almost wonder if he was just the real, just genuine, wholesome soul that he was represented in this in real life before he passed away. Really enjoying this. It's a lot of cheesy fun. Not the best made show in the world, but it's a lot of fun to point out the little goofs, the errors, because the budget that it was made on, a lot of the repeat cast, the repeat scenery, things of that nature that are just really enjoyable. In fact, there's one scene in this season here in an episode where Bruce Banner, David Banner in this show actually, is transforming into the Hulk, and the camera operator made a little bit of an error in the way that he was aiming the camera, and apparently weren't able to correct it. He's transforming into the Hulk, and his shirt's tearing off, and you're seeing a muscular green man underneath it, but you can catch a little bit of glimpse of his face in the corner of the screen, and it is Lou Ferrigno who portrays the Hulk, but he doesn't have any of his green makeup or his Hulk wig on. So you're seeing the Hulk body under the shirt coming out, but the little bit you can see of his face and hair is just normal Lou Ferrigno, and they goofed that up a little bit. So it's good for a laugh every now and then to catch that kind of thing. I'll be kind of sad to finish that one off. Next up, another continuation here. Still plugging away on Season 7 of Friends. I'm getting close to the finish on that one. As I said last week, this is just a kind of a background thing when I have some time, when I'll be working on it. Sometimes when I'm editing my videos, I'll have it playing in the background as a distraction, kind of multitasking that way. Just checking out the update from the old DVD that I used to have in my library. Which brings me to more continuation, as I discussed the last one. Star Trek Enterprise, my complete series, working on Season 2 at the moment. I take this one to bed with me every night, pop it in. I rewatch this about once a year, and usually in the same way. Put an episode in, see how far I get. Most of the time I'll fall asleep before the episode's over, so it could take me several days to get through one. So yeah, getting close to the end of Season 2. And loving this show as always. Did not make it to the theater for this week, unfortunately, so it's gonna be 2 weeks in a row where I've got no theatrical viewings, which is really strange for me. I tend to go to the theater 1 to 3 times a week. Didn't make it. Missed out on a couple movies that I was curious about. Probably didn't perform very well. Had some short theatrical runs, and by the time I went to go see them, they were already gone. So it happens. But anyway, that's it. Thank you again for watching. If you have any thoughts or opinions on my selections for this week, have you seen any of them? Do you have any things to share about them? What have you watched for this week? If you'd like to discuss them, drop comments down below. And thank you once again, and I will catch you on the next one. You guys have a nice evening. Appreciate you. Thank you. Good night.